So we're talking about toxic cultures at work. Is that right?
Yeah.
And there seems to be a lot of noise around that at the moment. I think one of the things I immediately thought around this, Dan, and I don't know if you just want to go into talking about what you think. Do you think anything before I even say anything?
No, I'll let you speak. Go on. I'll let you.
Well, the only thing I suppose when I see anything like this, it was a bit like working from home, or historically you talk about engagement, or you talk about retention, recruitment. All these spaces, you almost assume there must be a set parameter for it, and there must be a clarity. What makes a toxic work culture or not? And I have to. So I always get uneasy when I start talking about something, because you almost assume, well, someone's defined this somewhere, and I need to understand what that is before I even dip my toe in this. And I probably haven't done enough looking at, well, what do people mean? But where I am with it was, all I thought initially when I saw it was, isn't toxic work culture, because I see some of the noise being made, and it just feels like, well, aren't these just bad work environments? Aren't these just people in bad places with work? And it's not necessarily a toxic work culture is anything more than it's just not a culture that has too much attention in making sure it's right all the way around.
Yeah.
And
I think my focus, if I was in an environment which was said to be toxic, or people thought it was toxic, the first thing I'd start with looking at, I think, is behaviours. So, because I think behaviours encompass all of this. So you've got individuals' behaviours, you've got team behaviours, and then you've got organisation behaviours, and leaders' behaviours, leadership behaviours to an extent as well. And I think sometimes what's classed as a toxic environment can come from either individual behaviours, team, organisation, or leaders' behaviours. And I think that's what makes things perceived as being toxic. Funnily enough, I just did a little blog on an article that was in the Metro around digital places, workspaces, so working from home, working remotely, and how potentially they could get toxic. And that what I came away from it was, every single one of them could be applied to the office, because they are just seem to be centered around behaviors. So it doesn't necessarily matter where people work from. If they're working in a team environment, then I think it's really important to make sure that the behaviors are right and everyone understands what those right behaviors are.
No, absolutely. And I suppose all I was thinking around this was, okay, so you can have bad management, bad team members, but also organizations themselves, where they come to agreements of what remuneration looks like, or what control looks like, or what assurance that people are doing the right work looks like. And I suppose all of this ends up driving sentiment, people being in good spaces or not. And it's that ultimate sentiment that leads you to even suggest something's toxic. And I suppose, what does toxic even mean or represent? And it just feels like, okay, it is a bad environment. And that's all you're dealing with here. And so if toxicness just means it's really, really bad, then why is that important at all? Why would everyone be making a noise around that? Why is that so important? Particularly at the moment, would you say, with that sort of shift from people being in COVID conditions and working from home and being in their environment, suddenly being shoved back into offices? Do you think that's raising emotions now, where people are almost reacting more than they ever have done about them not feeling like they're in a good space? That almost triggers something more excessive now, that they've been, let's say, cocooned or protected in their own home environment.
Possibly, yeah. I think there's definitely something in that, and to be honest, I hope so, because I think if people aren't happy or they feel like there's a bad environment or a toxic culture, then I think, I've worked in a lot of places where it's just been almost accepted and just people have just got on with it. There's been a couple of people who've been really had really behaviors that shouldn't have been allowed to continue, and they have. Same with teams. You have teams that have these different behaviors, and then the organization itself. And I think what we're seeing maybe is that you're absolutely right. I think people are, they've been in that isolation or gone through 2 horrible years of COVID. Um, and it's important to remember that every single person who's been through COVID will have a different journey. Some people have lost jobs, some people have done well in jobs. There's all these different things going on. So I think for organizations to kind of just not recognize that, or kind of be a little bit aggressive to that, to say, well, all right, we've come out of COVID now, so we need to claw back what we missed in COVID or whatever. So putting pressure on people where people are trying to take that pressure off themselves, that could potentially feel a certain way.
But do you think organizations are doing something in this space? Or do you think it could be a case of just emotions are all over the place, and there is a lot more noise from individuals about what works and what doesn't? And maybe, and I'm not saying, oh yeah, organizations aren't doing anything either, because I suppose what drives an organization to behave anyway? Well, isn't it leadership teams and probably people within the organization as a whole? So when we're talking about toxic environments, we're talking about the people within that environment, aren't we? That they're getting something wrong, perceptively as a whole. And really, when you're looking at everything that's just happened to the world, with being a lot more prioritized in oneself, being a little bit isolated and being able to behave exactly how you want, and then being pushed back into, I suppose, more collaborative ways, or less more collaborative ways. That makes no sense. But what I mean there is that they've been almost pushed back into the priorities again, picking more onto, we've got to perform, we've got to do this. And that shift in emotion, exactly as you say, it's quite difficult to navigate well, isn't it? And
absolutely.
Is this not just a boiling pot of emotions that's finding the way to navigate that well is very difficult? People coming back in, an organization, no, it's got to fight to survive. Matching those two things is a really difficult thing to get right. And I suppose
one of the things I've seen in when I've read things about this and researched this, over the last few years, is I think one of the things that really starts to show in a toxic culture is just the lacking of one thing. So there's behaviors that definitely make this worse and start to add to it. But I think the one thing is trust. So if there's a lack of trust there, then as human beings, people start to look at what other people are doing, and maybe this working from home and working remotely has made that a lot worse in a sense, because if you're on the office with someone, you kind of know what they're doing and you can see where they are and what times they're coming in and leaving. But when you can't see them, if there's a mistrust in the organization, and maybe that's they don't trust the employees to do what they're supposed to do. Other people are looking at their colleagues going, well, he wasn't on that call, he must be doing this, and filling in the blanks. And I think that trust is really important to have in your teams and in the organizations. And I think that works both ways as well. I think organizations have got to trust the staff as much as they can. And I think the employees have got to trust the organizations and leaders. But, if that's not being agreed on, what those trust parameters are, and we've talked about honesty a lot in other talks, and
Yeah, and whilst you were talking there, I was thinking micromanagers and the effect, or micromanagement and the effect that has on an individual. And why do we micromanage? Well, because we don't trust people to just do what they've got to do. And we all know what it's like to work in a small team or even a bigger team, and you've got someone above you who doesn't have that trust. Likewise, have we worked in environments where there's a lack of trust from bottom up? You know, almost to be treated in the right way. There's almost like, okay, this organization asked us back into the office because they just want to make more money, and they want us being more, you know, because they don't trust us. You know, almost that filling in the blanks attitude, where you know, that wasn't the intention when we dragged you back into the office. It was something else. And it's the reason I go into that at all is because I think it's so easy for everyone to decide toxic, bad, and come to that conclusion, when actually neither one is positioned to do anything bad or toxic in the first place. It's just filling in the blanks and creating a sort of phantom environment. And it's not a phantom because people sincerely feel it, but it's the lack of communication, the lack of clarification, the lack of all of that. And when neither one is you know, malignant or you know, wanting to do anything nasty to anyone. And so, but when you talk about toxic cultures, it almost sounds like someone's there, you know, going, I'm going to be malevolent here and I'm going to make this place unpleasant. And it's probably not. A lot of it is just down to, you know, leadership teams deciding, actually, we've got a lot of challenges and we've got to get on with these, and making decisions. And then people coming in and being shunted so forcibly that it just all feels so bad. And
and I think a good place to start with this, because a lot of organizations won't always necessarily all know what they're all striving towards and what they're all there for and what they all want. So maybe there's something in that collective vision that needs a bit of work. But I tell you what, you can work on straight away, the things that you guarantee collectively you won't want. And I've never worked anywhere where someone's gone, should we have a toxic culture? And everyone's gone, yes, please.
Yeah, I want to work there.
So if you can see that starting to happen and bad things are happening, and you're seeing these kind of trickles of things and, you know, behaviors and feelings and emotions coming in, I think collectively everyone would say, well, I don't want to work in a place like that. And, you know, leaders will say, well, I certainly don't want to run a place like that. And it's just going to lead to bad things. So maybe ironing out and finding out what your shared behaviors are and what you're trying to achieve is something you can definitely work on. But I think for the exact there and now part, you can stop the line and go, look, guys, this is starting to feel a certain way. I'm sure everyone felt it or heard about it. Let's just discuss this now. Have some honesty, get everything out in the open, work out what these behaviors are and what this mistrust is maybe, and start working from there.
Yeah, absolutely. Start unpicking, you know, start talking about what doesn't feel good. Because I think, you know, that label of toxic culture, it seems like, okay, yeah, it's topical, and people will probably be aligning a lot of the stuff they read to their own environments and go, well, this happens here too. People have forced us back into work, and you know, there is a lot of micromanagement going on, and all of that noise that ultimately, if you just brought to the table, you might have an explanation behind it. You might have a reason for it being exactly that way. And none of us, I think, goes to work to not contribute. You know, deciding I'm going to go to work to not contribute. I'm going to go to work to do the worst I can. I think we all go with an intention of contributing and doing stuff. So I think, yeah, back to what you said, I think there's a balance to be had within all of this, isn't there? But it all just needs to be unpicked first, with people actually going, okay, the organization doesn't want to mistreat us. The people around here don't want to come in here and do a lot of crap, and just getting that clear and then starting to go, well, okay, so what is it that's not working at the moment? Why do we feel this is all so bad? and starting those conversations.
Yeah, no, you've talked about micromanaging there, and I find that one of the most frustrating things culturally that you come across, because I just don't see I don't see how it's ever gonna make anything better. I mean, if we're talking about supporting people, that's one thing, but I think micromanaging, no one enjoys that, and I think even from the person who's doing the micromanaging, surely that's not a good resource, is it?
Well, funny you should say that. I was having a very loose chat with someone in the bar yesterday, and it was someone who worked in the bar, and they were about to start a new role, and they were talking about how they didn't really want to be in a leadership position, and it saddened me immediately, because I think anyone who's daunted by leadership, it's like, no, it's made out to be far more complex than it has to be. You should enjoy it. You're going to be bringing people along the journey with you. And so it saddened me immediately. But then after a bit of an explanation, it was like, well, they felt that they were a perfectionist and they always ended up micromanaging. And it knew that wasn't good, but couldn't help it because there just wasn't that belief that people would do it to the perfection level that was seen. And you're absolutely right. I don't think people set out to be that way. It's just they can't help themselves sometimes. Because again, back to a bit of what you said earlier, that lack of trust, that people see that. And how do you get that trust? Well, it's probably believing that people believe in the outcomes as much as you, and can see what that outcome needs to be. Because if people believe in that as much as you and can see it the same way, well, then surely they're going to do everything to make it that way too. But it is a fascinating area where you start looking at, well, why do people micromanage? Why do people not trust? And it's invariably a short conversation away from actually it's just getting everyone seeing these things the same way.
Did you say anything about? Did you respond to them saying that the micromanage things, or did you?
Oh, we explored it exactly as we are now. I just said, I think we took on exactly that journey. It was more sad for me to hear that someone was, didn't see themselves as a good leader. And I just thought, well, that hurts, because if you're passionate about a space and you get it, why would you not want people around you on that journey too, to share the burden and get that right together? Why wouldn't you? And to do yourself down and not just be dancing into that position, because obviously I think there's a basicness to this, that with a position of responsibility, obviously making more money potentially, and better opportunities for you and your family, and not seeing yourself as capable of that just hurt. I was just like, oh God, don't do that to me. Because it's not as hard as people make out. I think leadership, I mean, this is going into a totally different realm, but leadership isn't as complex as people have made it out to be in this world. I think there are people who inspire people and are naturally, a certain way, but that doesn't mean other people aren't leaders. That just means these people can lead in so many different, environments and opportunities. But we're all leaders in the spaces we completely believe in. The moment you've got someone in that space, and I think, I just saw in this person they have so much to them, and within the space, and it's just why would you ever not see yourself as a percent? Anyway, it just saddened me.
It's quite refreshing to hear that someone actually saw that in themselves as well, isn't it? And see it as as something that a possible self-challenge that they need to overcome. Interesting. Normally, I think the normal micromanagement behavior would be not really that self-aware.
But again, Dan, maybe that's our preconceived idea of it, because you have to remember how vulnerable we all are, and you've heard of imposter syndrome and all of that. And I think a lot of us in work, we don't see ourselves as measuring up to the challenges that are in front of us. We have this preconceived idea that people are perfect around us, and we're quite the reverse. And I think people are quite happy to keep on those facades. But I think if you strip everything back, we're all well, me more than anyone, more useless than anyone. And I'm quite comfortable with that because I know I can contribute to whatever's in front of me. But if people don't treat me that way, well, then I'm probably in the wrong environment, and I need to find somewhere where people do value me and see my contribution as only a positive thing, that I'm constantly going to try and get better. I'm constantly going to do all these things and believe that that's my own internal drive. Whereas I think very quickly we assume so much about everyone. And again, with people who do end up micromanaging, it's probably that whole thing. They do see an end result quite clearly, and they just don't believe other people are capable of doing that to some extent, or want to do that. Whereas I'd say, no, I think everyone does want to achieve things and everyone does want to contribute. It's just sometimes things can get to the wrong place through lack of shouting out when things are going the wrong way.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So
we better stop there, shall we? Or...
Yeah.
Poor Rory.
Another thought for another day.
Yeah. Well, we could stop recording that one. See if I can do that. Recording. Stop recording.